Action!
So our guest today is the National Creative Director of one of the top agencies in the country called Schbang.
Tell us some stories of the viral campaigns you've created for the brand.
Aldo replaced the Coke with bottles of water, right? So that became big news. Quickly after the news broke up, we put out a post with replacing the Coke bottles with 2 Fevicol bottles. Put out a very quirky copy that said, "Na bottle hategi, na valuation ghategi." And you know the best thing is when you get your own work on WhatsApp. Have you seen this? I was like, हाँ देखा तो है. Few years ago, we did this campaign for Uno and we did it on Tinder. It's so funny because we won the Tinder business thanks to this. It's just 3 things: insight, idea, execution. So if you have a great insight, your job is more than half done as a creative.
And the creative team was how big during that time?
There were 3 people. I was the 3rd person.
So how many people are working under you right now?
Right now, the team is 150 people.
150. You've come a long way.
Yes.
So our guest today is the National Creative Director of one of the top agencies in the country called Schbang. He is the man behind some of the most magical ads we have seen in the past few years. The name National Creative Director might make you feel like he's some old guy, but he's absolutely not. He has recently earned himself a well-deserved spot in 30 under 30 impact list. He is not only the creative brain behind Schbang, but sometimes he's also the vocal cord of Schbang. Because his voice is so good that he sometimes uses it in his own ads. So today we have the privilege of listening to his voice for 1 hour straight. Aditya, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It was a lovely introduction.
So tell us, Aditya, how has your journey been in Schbang from the top to being a national creative director?
It's been, fairly wild. I would have never imagined, not leave alone my own journey, I think the company's journey too, when I joined. So when I joined the company, I was very clear at that point in my career, I was just starting out. And when you're starting out, there are 2 ways you can look at things, right? One is you join a big company and you surround yourself with people who are extremely knowledgeable and you learn from those people, right? I had seen what that looks like in internships, right? And I was not particularly excited because access becomes a problem. You know, you don't necessarily get to spend time with the people who really know a lot. And I was clear that what I wanted to do was learn when I was starting out. And this place was also just starting out. So the thing was, and this was just, it was an intuitive thing. I could have been completely wrong about this. But somewhere in me, I felt like this would be a good place to learn because it is learning how to operate itself. So the organization will figure itself out. And maybe in the process, I'll figure myself out.
This was how many years back?
This was about 8 years back.
You've been in Schbang since 8 years.
Yeah.
And how big was the company when you joined?
So about 60 people.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that was also quite big.
Yeah, which is a relation to what we are now, which is like 1,400 people.
Oof.
Yeah.
That was like the initial years of the company.
That was the initial years of the company. Exactly.
And the creative team was how big during that time?
There were 3 people. I was the 3rd person.
What did you join there as?
So I joined in what we call creative strategist, which is a junior starting role. So the 3 people when I started, there was a creative head. And I think we had some sort of manager, and then there were 1 or 2 of us which were in the junior.
So you joined it as an intern there?
I joined full time.
Okay.
I joined full time. But even with that, there's a funny story because I never applied for a creative role.
Okay.
Yeah. So because all the internships I had done before that were in servicing. Mujhe laga that's what I know. You're good with people.
Yeah, you are very good with talking.
Exactly. I was like, utna aata hai, baki malum nahi. So at creative, it's just generally also a little, I would say, scary. It like when you're just starting out, you don't know what it means and what it involves, and you're like, and to say that you're a creative person means a lot. So I was a bit unsure about that. And so I applied for, funnily enough, what in our company we call solutions, but back in the industry, what we call client servicing. Fortunately, and I think due credit to our HR team, they were like, no, I think this you're in the wrong line. You are meant to do this. They said, why don't you talk to the person who was our creative head at the time? And I had a great conversation. And I think what put me at ease was it was a team of only 3 people. So I was like, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्या होगा? I mean, I'll be embarrassed in front of 2 other people. So I was like, ठीक है, cool. Versus, some of the other agencies and the places that I was interning in were, international networks, like with offices all over the world. So they had a very different way of like working. And I had seen the way like creative teams and servicing teams worked. And there was a lot of there was distance between them. And there was like the creative teams had like an ego and a chip above their shoulder and stuff like that. I said, ye sab nahi karna hai. So this was nice. This was chill. This was like, it felt like I've come from a college canteen and I've entered another sort of, I think in those days, we were definitely very much like a campus. The environment also was like that. Most of us were very young. And I think there was that hunger of like wanting to do. We didn't know how to do, but we wanted to do. So the intent was there. And I think what was for me, what was reassuring was that the founders were people who had set up previously a very successful agency.
Yes.
And were now starting a second. So I think it felt like they knew what
They
they were
knew
doing.
what they
Even
were
though we
doing.
didn't know what they were doing. At least someone knew what they were doing. So I was like, okay, if I can follow in their footsteps.
So when you started out,
Yeah.
you were the third person. You were the junior person,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So other 2 guys, what kind of role did they have? Like,
So one person was, at the head of the department. And there was one person who was like a mid-level sort of a manager type of person. There was me, and then later down the line, another person who were juniors.
why I was asking this was because now Schbang makes huge kind of ads, like
Right.
very huge.
Yes.
So in early days, when there were
Yes.
only 3 people in the creative
Yes.
team, in which one were you, who was junior.
Right.
So what kind of ad you used to create at that time? Like,
Very good question. So I think we started out as a digital first company
okay,
and primarily doing social media
right.
marketing. So the way I think the teams were structured, which was very interesting for that time in the industry, even today, is that usually what happens is there are clear boundaries between what creative does and what client servicing does. Client servicing largely involves project management, liaising with the client, making sure things are following a certain timeline, so on and so forth. Wherever possible, adding a little bit of strategy to the piece, so on and so forth. But almost never is a client servicing person a creator, right? Is not a writer. And from day one at Schbang, we said we don't want our solutions people only to be sending one message to another person, right? We want them to add a little bit more to it. So from day one, solutions person was also in a sense a creative person because they did the everyday writing for social media.
Like jack of all trades, kind of.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Like, helping with the posts and stuff like that, cracking those and things, which actually helped our team a lot because otherwise, if the solutions team was not doing that, I would have had to sit and write, the copies for all brands,
Right.
which I didn't have to do so much of. I still came to help on a few things or on important days and stuff like that. But it let me concentrate on the slightly bigger campaigns that we would do, whether, it was a 360 campaign, an ad film, something, whether it was something to do with tech. So I think right from day one, which also rarely happens in anyone's career, is you're on the deep end of doing also fairly big things. Most people when they start in the creative industry, you will hear stories of people writing emailers for 6 months
Yes.
before they are even allowed close to a set,
Yes.
right? And understandably,
Fair.
there's a thing fair.
Yeah.
I was like on set on my second week. I was in a client meeting on my third day. So I think that the pace at which things were moving, and it like they just put you on I remember my first day. I had never written a first day. Let's remember, I didn't even know I was creative. Right?
What is your role as a creative person? I mean, what does a creative person do?
Yeah. When I started out, it was largely a couple of things. One is on if you're pitching a film, which is typical, helping craft that and write that and things like that. There was a funny story with that because I remember my first or second day, and we were pitching for a new business.
Okay.
New client, and the person who heads our BD team comes up to me and she's like, "You know how to write a script, right?" And I'm like, "There's only one right answer." So I'm like, "Yes, of course.
I can do it."
I can do it. She told me what the brief was. Fortunately, she had a bit of a premise on how she wanted to do it. I wrote something. And I was like, "Oh God, this is crazy. Is this really happening?"
No chat GPT that time.
No chat GPT. And I had I mean, looking back, I'm sure it was fairly bad, but I did something. The funny thing about that was that I never had any training in how to write a script, right? So, I mean, I had no format or template or like any sense of what I was doing. I just felt like, bas, ultimately करना क्या है, कहानी लिखनी है. You just have to let's write a story and see where that goes. And I think somewhere it was a good start. Unfortunately, at the time and for that in that first week, because the client that we were pitching to was a luxury client.
Okay.
We had a consultant who had come to help us, who was sort of like a luxury consultant. Okay, and I was like, first thing, मेरे को इधर script लिखने नहीं आ रही है. And now I have to go and show it to someone who's a luxury consultant, who experienced, someone who's worked on like Louis Vuitton and like the biggest brands. First day I've written this. Second day I have to show this to the consultant.
Consultant, yes.
And third day I have to pitch it to the client. Hilarious start, I think, quite funny. What I remember of those days were people were very kind and helpful.
Okay.
But yeah, to your question on what does a creative person do, I think it's a whole bunch of different things, and it's grown as we as an agency have grown. Fundamentally, what a creative person does finds the story, I would say. There are a million ways that can play out. That can play out in a film, that can play out in an activation experience, that can play out in a pop-up that you do on ground. It can play out in many ways. In our business, the simplest, if you're just starting out, the simplest framework on which advertising works. And even you'll see this even when, a lot of campaigns are submitted for awards and things like that. It's just three things: insight, idea, execution. Okay, that's the simple. If you don't know anything else, this is the three simple framework to remember. Again, the way to understand that simply is why, what, how. Insight is the why, idea is the what, execution is the how. The creative team comes in is more on the what and the how. So the why is typically the strategy team sort of helps with that. When we were starting out, we didn't have a strategy team, so it was called my role also was called creative strategist. So I was doing why, what, how every time. But essentially, if you have a strategy team, then that will help you, or a planning team, as we call in the industry. If not, then you start doing it yourself. You dig for an observation, something that becomes like a statement of fact in terms of the why. And basis the why, then you need to go into what is it? Okay, you found a reason to do something, but what is it that you're actually going to do? Then the how can be a script, the how can be a social media copy, the how can be can be a radio script, can be anything.
But at that time, you guys used to do only social media, right? No TV ads or something?
We no
Initially?
TV. We were doing digital ads. So
Okay.
we were doing like DVCs, what we call. At the time, not so much TV. No.
So digital ads, radio, and the written thing.
Radio
mostly.
also not really. We were doing so largely. We were doing social. We were doing a little bit of web. So in terms
Okay.
of helping brand websites, stuff like that.
Okay.
We were doing email. We were doing obviously that was a time where influencers were really big. So helping with like working on if there were any influencer collaboration is there.
But 8 years back, influencers were very big.
They were big. They were just starting out.
Yes, exactly.
In the sense that the wave had begun. You know, your Sherry Shrops of the world were, a big. It also started from like YouTube that was now making its way into Instagram and stuff like that. If we were doing any collaboration with them, then writing for that, stuff like that. So those were the various things. And that's why, the name came the whole shebang. Because from day one, that's what name essentially means. Colloquially, the phrase goes the whole shebang, which means a little bit of everything, right? And and the way that our company name is spelled is not SHEBANG, which is the actual word. It's SCH, which technically in hexa code actually means that read everything that follows in its entirety. So it was interesting. From day one, there was that little bit of that tech element to it. And it was like from day one, we have an internal production house. We have teams that can do social for you. We have teams that can do influencer for you. We have teams that can do media for you. We have teams that can do website and tech for you. So, which remember, in 2015, 2016, today to aajkal to har koi kar raha hai. But that time it was
Huge.
It was big to say that we have all these offerings. Yeah.
So kind of ads you guys used to do in digital earlier.
Yeah.
So small and medium businesses wants to do it right now. So do you have any suggestions for small and medium enterprises as to what kind of campaigns should they create and how should they go about it?
I feel like it should be a good mix of performance marketing and very good content marketing.
Okay.
So essentially, when you're just starting out, what you want to do is sell, right? And
Right.
nothing should be taken away from that. There's nothing ugly and bad about that.
Absolutely.
Right. So, which is completely fine. And there's nothing wrong in doing hardworking product ads. Because, that is going to help with your sales funnel. Today, consumers, other than, what your product does and what the ingredient story may be or how you're better than A product is better than B product, what consumers really want to know is who you are and what you stand for, right? You don't, and I think the notion has changed that you don't have to be Nike to have that. You can be a guy who started yesterday, but you still need a purpose.
Right.
You still need why you're doing what you're doing. And consumers want to buy into that. So I feel like a good content marketing strategy that talks about that in a big way can be really helpful. One of the brands that has, started small but has scaled over the years is this brand called The Whole Truth. Right? You all must have.
Yes.
It's got this
Bars.
nutrition
protein
bars. Exactly. Protein bars. And now they are into various kinds of things, shakes and so on and so forth. But they started as a protein bar company. And their philosophy was, as the name suggests, the whole truth. That whatever we do, 100% the ingredients we claim they are, and no added sugar and all of those kinds of things. And they were attacking brands that, the back of the pack doesn't really tell you what the product has. Whereas their thing was, we are intent on telling you the truth. And the truth is what we're after. And the truth shows in many ways, in terms of the way we make our products, the way we make the processes, the culture of our company, in a lot of ways. So I think when people see that, and then it kind of, if the strategy flows from that, there's you're talking about who you are, along with talking about what you do.
Right.
So I think that's a good mix to have, even when you're a small and a medium company, so that whatever the touch point, even if you have nothing else but a website or just an Instagram page, if a consumer goes on that, can they quickly find out, what is it that you really stand for?
So I wanted to know, how can creating content for these businesses help them convert it into top line?
Right.
Because sometimes what happens, you run the ads
Correct.
and things don't work out.
Sure.
The return on investment is not as good.
Sure.
So do you need to at that point work on your product or on the ad? Like, how do we figure out that area?
My recommendation would be to keep content marketing organic when you start and not spend so much on that. Try and hack into things that are working for social media, right? So whether it's a format that a particular platform is pushing a little bit more, work with the algorithm. Is my recommendation, right? If in 2023 you're still making statics over reels as a problem, right? So I feel like there are certain things that the platform itself wants to push a little bit more of.
Right.
How do you use those touch points? Interestingly, how do you find out what your consumer cares about and start making content about that? So it becomes a little bit beyond product with a subtle, cue in for the product, but it becomes more so about, the consumer need. Whether it's category education, whether it's, just from a health and nutrition point of view, it could be from many points of view. So I think that's important, where invest, I would say, not so much on media, on those assets, but invest on good content production. And it can be simple. It could be a setup that you do in your house, but do it well, shoot it well, make it well. And put it out there. And I think gradually over time, that if you play that game well, that will scale. And in parallel to that, it is good to have a performance marketing strategy that is specifically talking product.
Okay.
And doesn't need to be so overhanging, and it can be very specific about, very tailored to what the product does and things like that. And that can work in, those investments. If the game is played well, even if the content on those things is made well, you can start seeing, what we call ROAS, which is return on ad spend, pretty well on that. Yeah.
I think we've seen a lot of streetwear brands these days producing high quality content and charging premium for that.
Yeah. Right.
So do you think brands also do the same kind of things?
I would say yes and no. Okay. So much of it comes down to the personality of the brand. Like, I feel like there are brands that have done well because they have done exactly what you said, which is from day one leaned into aesthetic, being like, this is
it's like a premium brand.
Actually, today, even small independent brands, more so than they did in the past, are spending on branding, right? So when you're just starting out, also spending a lot on getting your identity right. And then indexing on that identity in interesting ways. So whether that's making sure that the website is nice and snazzy, whether it's making sure the content that they're shooting sort of mirrors their image, so on and so forth. Then there are also brands who are playing to the medium in an interesting and fun way, right?
Like what?
So let's say a brand like Zomato or Swiggy, right? These are brands that we all love on social media. Their content isn't really aesthetic or great, or their edits.
It's just relatable, maybe.
It's relatable. So their dirty edits. There's stuff that people like to share on social media.
Right.
So they are going for relatability. They are not going for like the best aesthetics and then even like they're not talking about like, our food looks amazing in a certain kind of way. It's more, as you said, relatability. So I think it depends on where you want to lean in.
Right.
My suggestion is if you can play a mix of both, where you can show your identity, but where you play to the medium you're on. Social media works in a certain kind of way. Make content in that kind of. I think the biggest problems that brands do is they adapt their content. They make one video, that they'll put on YouTube, the same one they'll find a way to
Put it on Insta.
Repurpose it to Insta.
and when they are repurposing, they are repurposing specs, right? They are not repurposing story, and I think that is a bit of the problem, because content is made for that particular medium, right? So which is why a lot of social media technically is not advertising in the way we've come to think about advertising, right? Like, for example, a print ad is a print ad for a certain reason, right? Because it belongs in a newspaper. And if you look at the layout of a newspaper, there's a science to that. There's some rules to that, right? Editorial works in a certain kind of space, in a certain kind of way. Layouts are done in a certain kind of way. Bleed space is there. Stuff like that is there, right?
Yes.
So the ad should belong to the medium it's on. Similarly, if it's a TV ad, it's going to be interrupting top production, right? It's like it's going to be interrupting TV shows.
Yes.
And TV shows are made with a certain kind of production. So you can't in between put something that's lo-fi,
Yes.
right? But on social media, where you and I are producing content as people, and we are producing content in all kinds of ways, in lo-fi ways, hi-fi ways, all kinds of ways. But if lo-fi is the language of social media, then if you as a brand are being lo-fi on social media, that's great. That'll work for you.
Any examples of such brands who focus on each platform?
So I think some brands which are global brands that I really like, if you look at Wendy's or Ryanair on social media, they speak the language. The reason they are so loved, and they're American, but you find following from everywhere, is because they speak the language of social media very, very well. And they're very cutthroat kind of about it. Now similarly, what's interesting is Wendy's has a certain personality on social media, but if you look at Wendy's billboards, they are not trying to be what they are on social media. Or if you look at Wendy's newspaper ads, they are not trying to be what they are on social media. So I think that's very interesting that they are being a little fluid depending on the type of platform they are on. And I think that only makes sense to me, because a lot of the times brands will tell us, no, but these are our brand guidelines. And we are forced by that, right? But those guidelines were often made for a different time or a different platform.
Right.
And those guidelines don't have place for new platforms, right? So today, when a brand comes and says, no, these are our guidelines, but on social media, those guidelines may not make any sense. A lot of brands today put up posts where they don't even put up their logo, right? And those do very well. And that would have been unheard of, because everyone, is crazy about that kind of thing, right? So I feel like it's, even though the space has been around for a while, people are just, even on the client side, just about getting comfortable with the idea that this is not an extension medium. I think for a long time it was being treated as an extension medium. Now they are realizing it's its own thing.
Right.
And it deserves its own kind of thinking.
Yes.
Which is also why you see that in the kinds of people that brands are now collaborating with, which, we were chatting about influencers. Today, it's not so much influencers, creators, right? And that language is also changed, because what would influencers do? Influencers were influence their audience about buying into a certain kind of brand, right? Creators don't do that, right? Creators say, this is what I'm known for.
This is the real review.
This is, and they are like, I could be, and you could be a billion different kinds of creators. I am not going to change my content for you. In my own content journey, if your brand fits, it fits, right? And I think that's very fresh. And that's very interesting.
That's what a lot of creators are doing right now. If you see a comedy influencer is trying to make content around that, like he's trying to get a brand inside that kind of content. So that's working a lot right now.
100%. And so, for example, great example, one of the brands that we work with is Happy Dent. where we recently did that, because Happy Dent is about that in terms of it's always had humor as an undertone to the brand. Smiles are a big part of the brand story. So it seamlessly makes sense to have a comedian as the collaborator.
Right.
So I think that's changing, and that's changing for the better, because now we're talking to people, or we're working with people who really understand the medium well.
Right.
And we're speaking their language, because back in the day, that used to be another thing. Going back to 7-8 years ago, where I remember I used to write scripts for influencers. Today, no influencer will take your script. They'll say, okay, I'll use it as mota just to, but
Guidelines.
I'm going to speak in my language. I'm going to speak. I have my community comes to me because I'm authentic. Right. So I think that is a very, very fresh change.
Right.
Where, I think authenticity has become a big part.
So I think first 15-20 seconds, you won't realize it's like a branded video.
Yeah.
After that 20 seconds, they subtly incorporate that brand name or somewhere.
Yes.
So it doesn't look like a branded video. So I think that works right now as a content.
So we have recently seen that writers like Tanmay Bhatt, for example, they wrote for Cred recently for that watch company Firebolt. And we have also seen some cases of guerrilla marketing. Such kind of ads go viral. Then why don't all the brands do such kind of thing only, right?
Yeah. So Cred had existed for a few years before they put out their first, what we call above the line communication, right? Somewhere they were clear that this is the brand we want to be, right? What we were talking about in terms of identity. And they said that, okay, there is obviously a product story, but our flex is going to be our identity.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, what is the product? The product is a financial tool. It's something that lets you link your credit card and make seamless bill payments. It's not the most exciting thing, but purely from the point of it's not like sneakers or something like that, right? Why can't a finance brand have a cool identity? So I think one thing that they identified very early on is that they want to go in for that. They also identified that who is the people who have the purchasing power. It's not Gen Z. So if you look at their ads, they're not Gen Z targeted, they're millennial targeted, which is why there are a lot of 90s references.
Right.
Because these are the people who have now the purchasing power, right? They're moving into their 30s. They're actually the kinds of people who will have credit cards and be able to do things like that. Now, given all of this kind of context, the brand has reached out to people like Tanmay, because they know that they've done content in the past that has really worked, and someone like Tanmay is phenomenal at building distribution, right? And he understands the game of virality really well. Reach out to a person like that and make it more about that. And I think that worked beautifully for them. I mean, there's always debate about people who will say, okay, but what was I love the ad, I remember the ad, but I really don't know what Cred is about.
Okay.
There's always debate on that, but my take on it is, it doesn't matter if you know or not know what Cred is about. The fact that you've heard of Cred and it's in your consciousness, that's enough. Because the rest of the job, if you have that kind of intent, you'll do yourself. One Google search and you'll know what Cred. What Cred is not important.
Right.
The fact that in a day where you have billion brand messages, it is stuck in your head, is the job done. I think for a brand like Cred, it made sense because it fit into their identity very well. And I think they've shaped their identity basis that early work. Right. This would have been I think their first set of ads were 2-3 years ago. Their journeys then has taken from there very well.
Okay.
And they've really leaned into that is our personality. A little bit of that, little bit of the quirk, a little bit of
fun element,
whimsical, all of that kind of thing, right? So it makes sense for Cred because we had not seen anything Cred had done before.
Right.
This became a way for Cred to establish its presence, its identity, and going on, they have been consistent in that identity.
Right.
Right? a brand is like a person. You know, today I meet you.
Yes.
You find out something about me. And then I meet you 3 days later, and then you get to know me a little bit more. And 5 days later, you get to know me a little bit more. But the thing is that the first day you met me, you had a first impression, right? So I think in communication, consistency
It's the key.
is the key, which is why, to your question on why everyone can't do it, because other brands may have consistently been using another voice.
Yes.
Right. So for them to change their voice overnight, till yesterday it was such an emotional brand, was such a heartwarming brand. Now, why is it trying to be quirky?
Right.
For example, right? So I think that is a big part of it, that you can't forget who you are as a brand, and your communication always has to be extending from there. So a lot of what Tanmay and team does is also with new age brands.
New age brands.
Right? Who are forging that identity. And I think that's brilliant, because if that's what they want to be, but if you are somebody else as a brand, then your content needs to, or your advertising needs to reflect that.
Yes.
Right. So coming to that, tell us some stories of the viral campaigns you've created for Schbang.
Yeah. You know, bunch of like different pieces of very interesting work. I think firsts are always important. So I think for me, one that, holds an important place is things that we did for Raw Pressery. And going to, the thing on creating identity, those were fun because I was creating identity for the brand.
Oh.
Those were similar to Cred. Raw had never done ads before. This was a way of saying not just what the product is, but saying who we are, which I always find more exciting, right? Because sure, there's only so many things you can say about the product, but you can say a billion things about who you are. So I think with Raw, it was very, very interesting in terms of their proposition. So insight, right? We discussed insight, idea, execution. This time, the insight came from the client, and it was a phenomenal insight. The insight was that in all our products, if it's orange juice, it's oranges and nothing else. If it's apple juice, it's apples and nothing else. It's a simple thing. When you and to a consumer, it's almost obvious, right? मैंने apple juice मांगा है तो apple ही मिलेगा ना, और क्या मिलेगा? But reality is that actually a lot of packaged juices have a lot more than that. So you will have concentrate, and you will have fructose, sugar, and a lot of like preservatives and chemical regulators and stuff like that. Right? It's scary actually when you look at the back of a pack. Whereas this brand is saying, you've asked for one thing, we're giving you just that one thing. It's so simple, and it works so beautifully with the name, which is Raw, which is like, it's Raw. And it was wonderful. That's another great thing about working with brands that are just starting out, is you get to spend time with the founders. It's a smaller organization. The founder is more interested. So it was lovely because he was telling us all these stories about how the brand started, how he started experimenting in his mom's kitchen. And those are always, those are the stories that we all love, right? I think I took a lot from that. And I think anytime somebody gives you a brief and the other person is passionate about that product, lives and dreams the product, is mad about the product, that passion is infectious, it's contagious, right? A lot of the times when we work on big brands with massive marketing teams, they don't necessarily have that, because for them it's a job. Right. They've not been really invested in the creation of the product or the brand. So that reflects. Whereas with this, in this case, it was ye maine mere haath se banaya. You could tell that the person was very nurturing and protective about the brand, and the amount of the insights you learn are phenomenal. So great thing with that one was phenomenal insight. And I always say, if you have a great insight, your job is more than half done as a creative, because that's everything. Everything kind of like builds from there. And then going into kind of idea and execution, our whole story was, can we tell the story of each fruit in an interesting kind of way, and say that there are like each fruit may have 100 different associations, right? Because we wanted to also play into who the audience was. And the audience was at the time very millennial, people, and who were consuming a lot of internet and pop culture and stuff like that, right? We decided to play on the thing of, and let's say an apple is known for 100 different kinds of things, right? When you think of Apple, you think of like Apple the company, you think of Big Apple New York, you think of like a billion associations. But when it comes to the apple in our orange juice, it is only the apple that's the most obvious apple, right? Like that was the story, which was a very interesting story, because you were like saying, apple, there are a million things that can come from it. There's Newton, there's gravity, there's Steve Jobs, there's blah, 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 blah. But it's in our apple juice, it's apples and nothing else. So that was a fun one to write, because I almost wrote it like not an ad, and I think that's what even when I look back, like there's a lot of pieces of work where I look back and I absolutely hate it. and I think that's good also, because that way you're growing.
Yes.
This one I still feel like it was fresh because it doesn't read like an ad. And I think what helped was I had not done too much of ad writing, right? So that's also what I say, and is I love working with people in our company who also just joined,
because you get fresh ideas.
Fresh ideas, man. It's the whole thing about, it's easiest to tell a person who doesn't know anything to think outside the box, because they don't know a box exists. And I think that was what happened with me on that. I didn't know a goddamn thing. And that's what actually worked brilliantly, because
Did the brand know that?
I think what worked is the brand saw that this guy is passionate.
Let's put it out there.
Let's put it out there that way. And funny story. So that's also how, in your introduction, you mentioned, I'm not sometimes just the writer, but the vocal cord. That's kind of how Raw was also the place where that journey for me started, because I would go and I would narrate, I would write, and I would narrate these scripts, and the client had gotten so used to hearing my voice that it had gotten stuck.
So that was your first vocal ad?
That was my first vocal ad. A very funny story on that also, because I'm not I had not done any VO before that, so I'm not a VO artist of any sort. And naturally, we had gotten in like a VO, a specialist, a VO artist, and we recorded with that person, edited the videos, delivered them. And then the client is just like, I'm not feeling it.
Passion is missing.
Something's not working out. It's like, you do it. So I was like, sure, man, why not? So it was fantastic. So I think that was a fun experience, because it started as digital ads, went on to, we also had an extension on Billboard. Later, it did so well, it went on TV. So I think it was, and to get that with your first campaign, I mean, it's like, it's madness. So I think in big ways, and I think for me, that's always been the special thing with Schbang is a lot of my firsts have been the company's first. And I think that's, always, because it was one of our first big campaigns that we did. It was my first big campaign. So, it will always be remembered that way.
So in the terms of numbers or something, can we discuss what kind of maybe top line or something they were doing before the ad that you made and after the ad?
I can't remember the exact figures now. But I do remember that it helped them, like their sales shot up significantly. It helped them increase geographies. It helped them also start in other countries, which was a very, they started in the Middle East, in Dubai, and other places as well. So I think all in all, it was quite successful. And then naturally, we also did 2 years post that, some really interesting campaigns that took off from there.
Tell us some more stories or the behind the scenes which goes into creating a campaign.
So there have been a bunch of different ones. I think one that from a few years ago, just when the pandemic had hit, was a piece that we had done for Fevicol. The context in the scenario was that 2020 had ended, it was early 21, and people had started going out again, right? People were frequenting public spaces a lot, stuff like that. And then the thing about the second wave had just started coming back in, that, this is fast approaching. So while everybody was trying to tell people to stay in, people refused to stay in, stuff like that. So that was what the public context was. And we were like, can we as a brand come up with a PSA to talk about this? Very interesting observation. And a lot of the times just advertising starts from observation, right? I know someone from the team had gone to like a cafe. And in those days, they used to put up these 10 cards on the table saying, don't sit on this table. Or don't occupy this table. Invariably, people will occupy the table. So we were like, thoda interesting hai, kya chal kya raha hai idhar? Ki, nobody is... so we were like, can we use this device interestingly? So we took a mall setup. And this was a little bit guerrilla. Because what we did is we had certain hidden cameras put in. And on the tables which had the 10 card, we stuck the chair to the table. So that even if somebody wanted to go and sit on those tables, they couldn't. Right? So the whole thing started. So just when the mall opened up, food court opened up, whatever, we started capturing some of these responses, but invariably the 10 card is there. Nobody cares about the 10 card. People are going to the table trying to pull the chair with all their might. It's like, it's that funny getting those reactions. They're wondering what is going on, what is happening. Is this a gag? Is this like a thing, whatever? And then they started going to like the manager or whatever and saying, what is this nonsense? Why is this happening? And all the manager did is point to the 10 card. And they went to the 10 card and we had customized the 10 card with the Fevicol messaging saying that for your own safety, this table has been stuck by Fevicol. So, the film really went crazy and viral in terms of like, so it was meant as a public service, but also because it was done kind of guerrilla, I think it took to WhatsApp in a massive way. So just like what the WhatsApp shareability was crazy. And the best thing is, this is a great, is when you get your own work on WhatsApp. Have you seen this? I was like, dekha to hai.
Likha bhi hai.
So that was really cool because like it took over WhatsApp groups, circulation in a massive way. Obviously, did very well on social as well, and of course, it had an important message, but to the point that we were also making on identity, very Fevicol, right? Very tongue-in-cheek, very quirky, very who Fevicol is. You've given an important message, but you've kept your identity. So I remember, and this was quite a story, that during the Euro 2020, Ronaldo replaced the Coke with bottles of water, right? So that became big news. So just quickly after the news broke up, we put out a post with replacing the Coke bottles with 2 Fevicol bottles, and put out a very quirky copy that said, "Na bottle hategi, na valuation ghategi." Because if you remember, Coke's share price had dipped quite a bit. And that was, the best thing is when you can't anticipate how viral something will go and it'll go.
Yeah.
And it went ridiculously viral. The success of that was so much that day, if you Googled Euro 2020, Christopher Ronaldo or Coca-Cola, the first thing you saw is Fevicol.
Wow.
So we had hijacked the news in that way. Because everyone was talking about it, whether it's news media portals. Mint is writing like analysis and articles, and I'm like, "Ye kya chal kya hai?" So just a social media post. But that was a lot of fun. And I think to your point on process, anything where the collaboration is fabulous, right? It shows. And with the Fevicol client, they are big collaborators. So the whole thing was in like 40 minutes, the whole thing was done. Because we were always buzzing on our WhatsApp groups with them. So a sketch was, someone drew a sketch on a piece of paper. The client had some point of view, 15-20 minutes of jamming on the copy. We quickly got it designed. 45 minutes later, it was out.
So that Ronaldo incident happened.
Yeah.
And then exactly what did you guys do? And then what time did the ad, that
So
particular piece?
I'm telling you that
45
in
minutes.
less than an hour, we had so I think that's the thing, because with moment marketing, it has a lot to do with speed and who is the quickest to say and have a point of view on this. So I think one thing was we identified that this is a moment that we should have something to say on. And then we quickly chimed in and did it.
45 minutes.
45 minutes.
Wow.
Insane.
And I think do credit a client because they are also crazy passionate. So I remember there was another post that we had done. This was like the last season of Game of Thrones. If you remember, those episodes used to drop really early in the morning, right? On Hotstar, 6 o'clock or something
4,
like
5 o'clock.
4, 5 o'clock or something like that. And I'm a Game of Thrones fan, but this client, who is a man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, has woken up at 4:30, watched this episode, made an observation. So this was, if you remember, there was this one, I don't know if any of you have seen Game of Thrones, but there was this one episode where Cersei says, "I want my elephants." Right? And he has picked on that moment, says a great moment. Hamare logo mein 2 elephants hai, let's do something with it. And 6 o'clock, he has sent us a message and said, let's do it. By like, before the world has woken up, we have had a post on it. Wow. So that also is like, people don't give people on the client side credit. But if you are excited and passionate about creating communication for your brand,
Right.
people will do anything to make it happen for you. So I think that's a big thing. And I feel like time and again, wherever we have done good work, it's been a result of some interesting collaboration, whether it's internally, whether it's externally. More recently, one of the pieces that I really loved working on was something for H&M, where every Diwali, they put out a new collection, which is called a festive collection. And their campaign name is Brighter Than Ever for that, specifically that collection.
Sorry, was that Jim Saab one?
22 was Jim Saab, which was when they came to us.
Okay.
So that's the campaign that we actually created. So in 22, they said they came to us and they briefed us along with different other agencies. And we thought to ourselves and we said, what do people want in 22? And 22, nearly 2-3 years of dealing with the pandemic, people just wanted an escape, right? They wanted a break. They wanted to forget that the pandemic happened. It was like, that trauma, let's just forget that it happened, right? So we said, okay, why don't we use that as the base of our thing, where your Brighter Than Ever is your escape to your happy place. And whatever your happy place may be, it could be friends, it could be you're living alone in a new city, so it could be your family, it could be whatever. It could be you raging to your own party. It could be many different sorts of things. So that's the way we decided to do it. And again, the collaboration on that is my co-writer on it. And so she is from Calcutta, I'm from Mumbai. And if you think about it, Calcutta and Mumbai both are cities with a lot of colonial influences. Right?
Staircases.
And just in terms of British architecture in a big way, right? So things that both of us, and funnily enough, it's a weird thing to be crazy about, was elevators. And so we were just one fine day chatting about that. And we were like, this is how we both love those, love vintage elevators. And we also, funnily enough, in the script needed that portal, right, to take you to your brighter than ever. And we didn't want the portal to be like something out of Harry Potter. It needed to be something real in the real world, which can take you somewhere. So we were like, wait a second, an elevator can be a beautiful portal. But then the thing is, who's going to control and who's going to take you there? And then the answer is very obvious, a lift man, right? Because a lift man controls the levers of an elevator. So that's where the idea of Jim came in. And we were like, this person, as soon as a character walks into the lift, Jim is able to understand without talking to them what their brighter than ever is. And he just takes you there. And the whole thing was like, clothes do that, right? Clothes put you in a certain mood, in a certain place. It can take you to a happy place. And every day you dress also bases what you're feeling, or even if it's not what you're feeling, it's bases what you want to feel. So that was our way of like communicating that. And so much of it is like just interesting observation that, individually people have. Married, of course, with a strong insight.
So usually that's what I've seen. Not a lot of brands put out the pricing of the product on the video specifically.
Right.
But there I saw on all the t-shirts, shirts, whichever mentioned, there was prices.
Yes.
So what was the thought process behind that?
A thought process was, as you're watching, can you buy? So not only did we put price, we put QR code. So if you watch the video and you scan it, you can directly buy that particular jacket just as you're watching the video.
There were QR codes on the
along
video.
with that. So, which was also very unique in terms of like, you like something, just buy it. So it came from there. Also, I think a big thing that H&M wants to talk about without actually talking about it is that it's fast fashion, right? So it is affordable, and affordability is a big part of the story. Right. But no, they are not the kind of brand who will say that. So the price becomes a good way to kind of say, give you an indication of what it's actually like. And then we thought the QR would be also interesting so that actually people can buy right there and then.
So were there any conversions? Do you know of that part?
There were a decent amount of conversions. The good part also is it's a massive media campaign. So it was like literally everywhere. From billboards to stores to, website to social to YouTube promotions. It was crazy. It's again one of those very good feelings when you're randomly watching something and you like get to see,
So tell us, how does your day look like now versus what it used to look 8 years before?
Different and still same in many ways. And I think I love that. What I was very keen on when I started my career is that I wanted every day to look different. And I think that very much holds even now, which is why I still do it. I think what's primarily changed is the level at which you operate. So I think starting out, I was far closer to the ground, more deep into the work. I love that. It was never that you were just working on one brand, right? So there was always that diversity, and that was kind of fun. And I think in those early years, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way because, I learned a lot through that by just doing.
So how many people are working under you right now?
So right now the team is 150 people.
Under you?
Under me, yes.
God,
so
3 to 150. You've come a long way.
Yes, it's been wild and it's been very crazy. So I think majorly what has changed is from being the one who does, because I'm a creative person at heart, I can never not be involved in the process. So I find ways in which, at least on a handful of projects, I stay in the creation process. But for a majority of things, it's now making sure that people are trained enough to do in an interesting way. So I think that has also been quite a journey. It's been a very fulfilling journey in terms of a lot of the people that, run our major creative business verticals now are people like who started out their careers with me, and I've sort of helped them get there. So that's also gratifying, to be able to have infuse that passion in someone, train them to get to a place where they can now manage their own ship. So I think that's what's exciting. In terms of today, the breakup more is, as I was saying, key projects I'll still get involved, but otherwise it's a little bit more process and operations driven, a little bit more on how to make sure that teams are running efficiently, teams are upskilled and trained enough. The way in which we do things is,
Standard.
optimized.
Yes.
So that we are able to deliver in the best way we can. It's different because definitely more left brain than right brain than when I started out. But I guess that's what growing means. So and it's also exciting because I think one other thing is very early on, the company put me in a place where it sort of gave me a sense of how business also works. Because just in my second year, I went to set up our office in Bangalore along with 4 other people. And that was very, very exciting. I just spent 5-6 months there, but just that experience of getting something off from the ground, very different. I learned a lot from that as well. So it's exciting to be building campaigns, but it's also exciting to be building teams and people. And I think the beauty of building teams and people is campaigns will forget you, but people won't. So it's always, even someone who's left 2-3 years ago, when you meet them and they talk to you about, the times you had or the impact that you had or whatever they may be doing today, and if that's helped in their journey, I think it's extremely gratifying because your work will always be for yourself, but this is in service of somebody else. So I think, it's gratifying if it can be amazing.
So talking about the training part, can you talk a little bit about how you used to train, or what is the process in Schbang in which you train the creative people in the team?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is taking from my own experience, right? Where a lot of my learning happened just by being in certain rooms. Whether you're watching, whether you're being thrown into the deep end on wanting to do things, I think that's how you learn a lot. The opportunities are on the table and it's just about allocation. Sometimes it means you have to find the opportunity for the other person. If you're willing to go there, not only is it beneficial for that other person, it's also beneficial for you because you have a differentiated piece of work that comes out of it. Just as an example, a few years ago, we hired someone who is a storyteller. And the thing that he had done before Schbang was he had taken an entire year off and he had gone all across India telling stories. And yeah, it was quite an experience. And he was part of this collective called Kahani Ki Dukaan. The thing they would go from town to town and also in the process raise a little bit money for setting up some sort of library for a village in the north. So that was their thing. And I was like, this person is like a living and breathing anthropologist, because he's gone to every corner of the level of observation that this person has is insane. Number one. Number two is this person is like, you don't have to teach this person storytelling. Like, we could learn storytelling from this person. So my intent was, how do I give him something that speaks his language and uses his innate skill well. So that came with 2 projects. One was, and I think they still stick out because they're very interesting piece of work. One was Amazon Prime Video had come to us when Mirzapur season 2 was launching. And they told us that, it had been 2 years since season 1 had come. People tend to forget what had happened. So they were like, the ask was very simple. Give us a recap thing. Very functional ask, right? And I was like, I don't want to just do an edit, or I don't want to do like, Sacred Games had done this where
They showed the previous
previous,
season.
and also they got Nawaz to like take you through what happened in season 1. So they shot with him, but I was like, Gabe, it's interesting, but still thoda simplistic. Can we do something a little bit more interesting? So again, going back to that observation, right? So in conversation with this person, I was like, where does our love for stories start? As people, is as children when our parents tell us stories or when our grandparents tell us stories, right? That's where your love for stories begin. Bedtime, what we call bedtime stories, right? Every kid will want to go to sleep only after after a story time, right? So we was like, this is an interesting touch point. And as adults, maybe we don't get bedtime stories anymore,
yes.
right? But what if we could get bedtime stories? And obviously Mirzapur is a very violent and grotesque word. But we were also like, that thing that exists where a mom will always be like, so jana nahi to gabbar aa jayega type of thing, right? So we were like, since it's for adults, can we do an episodic bedtime stories podcast? It's a 10-15 minute thing where there's a narrator from the world of Mirzapur who's talking to you about what happens. And it's like this person set in the future who's telling you what happened in the past. And you're using snippets from the audio snippets. So it's purely you're using audio snippets from the show, SFX, dialogue, stuff like that, right? And we were like, it's Amazon, so they also have Alexa as a product.
Right.
And just all the consumer needs to say is, Alexa, tell me the story of Mirzapur. And every night it'll play one episode story out for you. So that was the thing. And that was a campaign, did very well for us, won us a lot of awards. But again, the point is it took from the innate skill set of one person. And I couldn't have done this without this person. Because this fits so well into what they do,
Right.
that it worked really well. There was another case where we were, again, post the pandemic, there was this, a lot of people started doing this, right? Distribution of grains and during the pandemic. And one of the insights that came to us was that in the kitchen, one of the most expensive ingredients by gram is actually tea. If you look at per gram price of tea,
Kesar. Kesar is also expensive.
Kesar, I mean, without it, there's no. Kesar is in its own league, but Kesar is not an everyday product, right? Something that you use every day. Tea is one of the most expensive, and it was funny because nobody was distributing tea. Everybody was distributing rice or grains or vegetables or whatever it was, right? Decided to poke around, do some research, and then there was an entire tribal belt in Maharashtra who said they had given up tea for the last 6 months because just too expensive, right? And we were like, okay, this is crazy. We approached Society Tea and they said, tell us where we need to drop the tea off. We'll do it tomorrow.
Okay, so they were not your client. You approached them with the idea.
So they were part of the Schbang network. Okay. So we also have Schbang also has smaller agencies which work with small to medium sized businesses. So Django is one such agency and they work with Society Tea.
Okay.
So through them, but it was not like a Schbang brand. It was a network brand. So through them, we reached out to Society Tea and we said, this is the problem. They said, sure, done. Tell us where. We'll have a van that delivers it.
Yes.
The thing is, I'm a storyteller. So I want to solve a problem, but I also want to tell a story, right? So I said, that's great, but can we also do a film on this? They said, nahi, iski koi zarurat nahi. It seems like something good to do, we'll do it. I was intent on telling a story, right? So I said, forget it. We'll make a film ourselves, right?
Oh,
yeah. And we'll do it very low production. So we have not much to lose. Worst case, agar kuch nahi hua to. and see where that kind of takes us. And I told this guy, you forget about what the client said. We are doing something. What he came up with was so beautiful, it was like a love letter to tea, right? It was like an ode to tea. Tea, if you think about it, does so much in terms of it's like a balm for the soul. It brings people together. It's a way two people who've never met can seamlessly connect.
A lot of emotional value.
There's a lot of emotional value. He ended up writing this very, very poetic sort of piece, which was a ode to tea. I said, okay, let's use this. And we are anyway doing the distribution and stuff like that. So during the distribution, we'll try and get some footage which is of these people finally being reunited to tea, making that tea for the first time in their kitchen after 6 months, coming to that corner where they like to come and meet for tea, and capturing all those experiences. And I think, again, what worked out was the result was so beautiful. It was so heartfelt. And again, we showed the client the product and they were like, oh my God, of course we have to do this. We'll tell. And then they were like, okay, now where do we spend money on? How do we, put money on this video, blah, blah, blah. How do we drive up more PR on this? So it's funny. It was a bet that could have not worked, but it worked amazingly. So much so, I think the biggest moment for us, because again, it was it was almost like we treated it like a college production, right? Is that year we went up during the awards, we went up against films made by like Ogilvy and Lowe and which were massive productions. Right, and this is like a film with less than $1 lakh that really did, which is just goes to show if you have conviction, if you have a strong story. So yeah, I think that mapping passion and interest to skill can be a big thing in terms of getting the job done.
Do you still tell the newcomers to write scripts for the ads like you did?
I definitely encourage them to, even if it's one thing I say is, even if it's proactive, even if it's for a brand that you may not have, that's fine. It's you putting your story out there, and you don't know how things work. Like the social distancing thing also came from not the Fevicol team. The idea of it came from someone else, from someone who brought the observation, and then the Fevicol team got involved and we built it from there. So I think anything can come from anywhere.
How do you deal with the brands with the changes? Because a brand has a different vision, an agency has a different vision.
Right.
How do you balance out both the things and give something which is very valuable to the client? Tell us about some weird, funny requests from the client which you all have tried to incorporate in your content.
Oh, the weird requests never end. It's a hard dance. I think it's always because making sure you and the client come on the same page is crucial. But to your point on the agency having certain goals and the client having certain goals, you as an agency will never work if your goals don't align with the client's goals. So I think you have to forget about what it is that what your agenda is. The only agenda that matters is what the client's agenda is. And if you can help bring that to light in an interesting way, then you are respected. Because otherwise it's always like, okay, what is it? The agency is trying to suggest something that's going to work more for the agency. And I think in the long run, that doesn't really play out. What happens is, if you have a good understanding of what the client wants to do, and time and again, if you're able to deliver on that, then what comes is trust. And when trust comes, freedom comes. And with freedom, the client will let you more and more do what you want to do. Not your own goal. It still will be aligned to what the client's goal is, but it will give you more freedom to exercise your creativity.
Right.
Which I think is important. So, but that will only come with you delivering on the client expectation well. Because otherwise it always goes into this catch-22, right? Where your agency will always say, yeah, this client never lets me do what I want to do. But the client will say, but the one thing I've asked you to do, you're not doing. You want to do, I've got you for A, but you want to do B, C and D. कर लेना, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. But first help, I do what I've asked you to do. So I think, and that is a good reminder. I mean, even for us, while we may want to do more things with the client, we may have ambitions with the client, we can't forget what the client has hired us for.
Right.
Sure.
And start by doing that well. And then I think over time you can scale from that. And we've done that with our successful clients where they hired us for one thing, but over time we've started doing more things for them.
So tell us some weird, funny requests from the clients. You don't have to name them.
Yeah.
But any stories which just comes in your mind when I ask you this.
All kinds of peculiar things where once something is shot, they'll say, change the script. I'm like, I understand. It really doesn't work that way. So I think the level, I mean, the sort of ridiculous demands that come are funny, and it's good humor. And also I think people think anything when you say, oh, कर लो green screen में कर लो, CGI में कर लो, change this person's costume. I was like, so I think those are always hilarious.
You guys still face that logo छोटा कर दो, logo बड़ा कर दो.
Oh, 100%. That never ends.
Do you have some more case studies about the Schbang, like some campaign you wrote?
Yeah.
Some before after stuff?
Again, there have been a bunch of different kinds of things. One I thought that was interesting from a touchpoint point of view was a few years ago, we did this campaign for Uno and we did it on Tinder. Again, the observation was that Uno is a game and we want to talk about a game. So where does anyone who wants to say they have game go? Tinder. Where, because if you want to find a way, you want to say you have game, you go to Tinder. So very sort of whacked out thought. Again, guerrilla, zero investment. All we had to do was set up a profile on Tinder. Put some saucy pictures of Tinder cards and have like a seductive bio and stuff like that, and just see what happened from there. And it was
Profile picture was what?
just like some
people, right?
No, not people.
Cards.
Tinder cards doing funny kind of
Okay.
things. We put that out there, and within it was insane. Within 5 minutes, we had 50 matches. It was crazy. Tinder took our profile down like 3-4 times. Wow. We kept setting it up again. It's so funny because we won the Tinder business thanks to this. Because Tinder later reached out to us and said, this campaign that you guys did, I mean, though technically not, was so good. We were talking about it so internally so much. Yeah. We'd love to give you a chance. So then Tinder later, 1 year later, came on as a client because of this.
That's a good story.
Yeah. So all kinds of weird things. The journey was very interesting because what the client wanted was they used to do these events where like game night kind of things. Tinder was actually a perfect place because you match, you start a conversation, you start a dialogue. And then if it works, what do? You go on a date, right? Yes. So in our case, our date was come for a games night. So it was actually a way to get leads for an event through a very, very interesting mechanism. And zero investment. And it really, it worked quite a bit. So I think that's something that we've always tried to do is how do we use touch points in an interesting way, whether it was this Alexa thing, whether it's this Tinder thing. Another thing that came to mind was, again, for Prime Video, Family Man was launching. And not use so much touch point on for Amazon is what they call living room devices. So if you have a smart TV, you have, as soon as you turn it, there's those banner spaces and home, like on where you have all the OTT channels and this and that and whatever, right? So specifically, Amazon said, okay, that's an interesting touch point where we want to do something cool. So we had a family man with an interesting activation idea where they said, okay, you use your Google, because most remotes have that voice search feature, right? So we had a command and we said, search for this. And then that video showed up. And that video was basically sort of a briefing where that he was giving you a briefing for something to do. Mm-hmm. And it was a way to tease out season 2. Yes. So it was very interesting because it's a very, I think we wanted to get views for YouTube, but we did it through living room devices, used a voice feature on a remote to trigger SEO for the YouTube and then get views on that and get people to look at season 2. So I think a bunch of that kind of stuff has been a lot of fun, where how do we find interesting consumer touch points? And I think that's the magic of digital, right? That unlike back in the day where there were like 4 or 5 places where you could do an ad on. Today, an ad is wherever you want to make it. And I think that is the exciting part of it. Like a lot of amazing campaigns today are like product ideas or like things with like great, like interesting, immersive experiences, stuff like that.
So small and medium enterprises, if they want to create such creative campaigns like Tender, 2 questions. What kind of people do they need to hire to think about these kind of campaigns? Yeah. Or if they don't have the budget to hire someone, what kind of process should they go through, or what should they do to come up with these ideas? Maybe read something or some inspiration or something like that.
Yeah, I think there exists a lot of great inspiration. So if you go through the award archives, there are particularly for guerrilla ideas, right? There's a lot. There are categories in most award shows which is guerrilla marketing.
Okay.
And some of those ideas are fantastic because they are very what we would call patli galdi ideas. And that's what small and medium sized businesses want, right? Not too much investment, but disproportionate PR or disproportionate result. I think those can be good inspiration points. I mean, you can't obviously...
Like which award specifically?
So anything from a Cannes, which is obviously big one, to like whether it's one show or Spikes, or even if in India, so the 2 big ones in India, Curious and Abby, other than Cannes, are all open for people to go and check.
It's their website?
It's their website.
We can check out the guerrilla ads.
Yeah. So for Curious, every year they'll have a separate. So if you could type Curious 23, you'll see
Curious what? Sorry?
Curious 23.
Curious 23. Okay.
You'll see the award, all the winners from 23. If you type 22, you'll see it from 22. So I think that's great because it's a good place
for inspiration.
Absolutely. To try and understand how other brands are doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gives you an idea.
So for creative stuff, do you have any other sources of inspiration? Maybe reading a book or on marketing maybe?
Yeah.
Or some book which has a lot of case studies from previous 100 years maybe?
A book that has a lot of case studies is possibly hard. But I think, like I was saying, there are a lot of these archives for you to look at for great case study. I think award things, whether it's also DNAD is another good one to look at. So all of these ones are where you can find out look at great case studies. And also understand the art of making a case study, because case studies are also like master productions. A lot of the time, at least the big ones, you'll realize that the way the case study is made is the effort put in that is almost as much effort that's put into making the film or making whatever hero asset that they had. That's a good place to learn that. Other than that, I think there are great books on creativity. So one book is, which I kind of refer to a lot, is Hey Whipple, Squeeze Me, is one that's very good because it tells you, it's again written by a guy in advertising, and it tells you about how the agency business works in general. And also to this, and he makes a great point of like, today an ad can travel anywhere, right? An ad is anything. Like even a GIF can be an ad, right? Anything can be, a meme can be an ad, anything can be an ad. So in a landscape like this, how can you work? Another one that I really like, it's not so much about advertising, but it's about creativity and observation. It's called The Art of Noticing. And because, as I was saying, the starting process of creativity is observation, right? And how can you train yourself to be a good observer? I think that's a great book on that.
You remember the name of the author?
I think it's called, his name is Rob Walker.
The Art of the Observation.
The Art of Noticing.
Art of Noticing.
It's
and
called
the previous book.
Hey Whipple Squeeze Me. I forget the name of the author.
Okay.
I think books that are written by memoirs of great advertisers are also a good place to start, just to understand the business. So Piyush Pandey's Pandemonium is a good one, just to, because it's actually case studies also.
Okay.
Because he breaks down his iconic pieces of work, what's behind the scenes happened on that, what went down, some of that. So I think that is looking at books of famous advertising personalities is always interesting and nice, because you get to learn a lot from there. So a bunch of these kind of different things.
Have you worked with Piyush Pandey sometimes?
No, I really haven't, but I have met. So yeah, because the account that we share is Pidlite, because they do, Ogilvy does the main line for Fevicol, Feviquick, all of those brands, and we do the digital. So it's, I think one of the big moments, highlights in my life was when Piyushji sent us a message saying that, for something that we had done on digital, which we was like, I wish I had done that. And I was like, oh my God, to have him say that was a really big deal. So I think, it's been fun.
So I wanted to know about some numbers in terms of the brands you've worked with after doing a campaign.
Yeah.
What are the numbers, if you could share, or no, if not the numbers, then what are the results they got after doing a campaign with Schbang?
Right. So again, exact numbers are a little bit difficult, but there have been interesting things that have come up. So in certain cases, whether it's being a number 2 and becoming a market leader, inching your way to number 1, or whether it's been you're finding prominence in a new territory, or whether it's just like what we call ad lift, in terms of better recall, better understanding on what the brand is. So I think it's been a different mix of all of those kinds of things. Sometimes it's about also like if it's very specific to a stakeholder, how do we improve recall with that and stuff like that. So
any examples of the brands you would like to give? Like after doing a campaign with Schbang, this was the results.
Yeah. So I think there was a campaign we did a few years ago for Castrol, which was, we did it with Tiger Stoff, and it's for their ultimate lubricants. I think the way that campaign, so it had many legs to it. It had a DVC. It had a rephrase AI thing to it, where Tiger was actually talking to the mechanic or talking to the vendor using that person's name, using that person's detail, using that level of like AI personalization. And I think that campaign did phenomenally for us in terms of sales, in terms of massive inroads into business. So I think also what helps is when we are very clear on what the client need is, right? Sometimes it's just salience, as I was saying. Sometimes it's a market share increase. Sometimes it's about sales. So sometimes it's about taking on a competitor. I think making sure and understanding that and then working backwards from there always helps.
Career standpoint, if someone is starting as a creative person, he's a junior right now, and maybe in 7 to 8 years, he might reach to your level, director, creative director.
Sure.
What kind of salary or money that guy can expect in the initial stage, and then up to where can it go? Because this is the fundamental factor that drives everybody towards a certain career.
I don't want to get too much into numbers, but I'll tell you
ballpark figures.
I'll tell you the way it works. Okay. The start is, I think our industry is hard in the sense of, your starting salaries are not the best. But advertising, I think, is like, if you look at it from a graph, it's like an asymptotic curve. So it's like that hockey stick, right? So if you imagine a hockey stick, your first 3 to 4 years are that curve of the hockey stick, right? So it's slow. But when you hit year 4, year 5, there comes a massive inflection point, and then it just goes up in a straight line. And it can be exponential, provided you have built a decent amount of work and things like that. And I think more so, I think in digital today, the salaries are fairly competitive. Anyone with above 5 years of work experience makes good amount of money. So I think that aspect of it has changed in terms of like long term. It's even, it starts becoming competitive even with client. It is a long game in the sense of money is what you're chasing. You have to put in those initial, be ready for those initial 4-5 years where you're not probably starting out at the same salaries as your other peers, but you can quickly catch up with your peers in other industries down the line, because as I said, it becomes exponential.
So after 5 years, like, do they have to only expect the salary, or there is some payment structure in which some percentage as far as how good the project does or something is also
That
involved in
depends
that?
on agencies to agencies, right?
It depends on agencies to agencies. It depends on the way because some agencies may have incentives, may have a variable component to the salary. So you'll have a fixed salary and then you will have a salary that is variable to what you
Performance.
do, to your performance.
Yes.
Those are just, I think different agencies have different ways they break that up.
What's next for you at Schbang now?
I think for us, one of our big visions has been to take India to the world.
Right.
And we've started in that process of we have now a small office in London. Where by the end of this quarter, we'll announce another territory international territory that we're looking to get into. And as we're scaling there in terms of business, I think the big thing for us is how do we scale also in terms of our work, right? It's one thing to say we have an office here and we have an office there. I think a big thing for us is also now, if you're saying India to the world, your work also needs to be at a global standard. I think that's the next big thing for me. It's been exciting to get to a place where today we are competitive in India. And I think we're at a creative standard that we're happy at where we are in India. But in terms of internationally, we have a long way to go. That's a good part of the challenge, because we've gotten to that place where we get our medals at a Curious and an Abbey, but of course, a Can and a DNAD is the place to go. So our eye is on the ball there. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So coming to that, if someone is starting out an agency right now, what are the necessary steps they need to take to get into that business? So if one wants to reach at that level, what are the things they need to keep in mind and what can be done?
I think if you start getting early on partners that are in a similar cycle as you, because then if you can grow along with your client, nothing like it. It's chicken and egg, right? A lot of small agencies want big clients because obviously it does well for them in terms of their roster, stuff like that, and it can help them attract new businesses. And I'm not saying that strategy doesn't work. It does work because a lot of big businesses are also very competitive on pricing, right? So they know that because they have the brand to offer, they will always find a vendor who will do it for them at a very competitive price. While that exists in terms of a project market, and that's good because you can finally say, okay, I worked on this big brand, and it'll open up more opportunities for you. I think in terms of long-standing client relationships, it will definitely help if you are also choosing a brand that is in a similar journey as you in terms of just starting out. Because there's more, I always feel there is more value you can add to a business at that stage. As you know, going back to our conversation in terms of setting identity, setting purpose, at the same time, talking about what the product is. A lot of new brands are finding themselves. And when they are finding themselves is when they need a partner who is ready to get just as deep with them on that. And then I think the dividends immediate for both, because if you have geared to the client goal and it starts working for them, that reflects obviously in the retainers that you start getting. It also reflects then in because then what the story that you are able to tell is this is where the business was and I scaled this business to here. And while I scaled this business, I also scaled myself.
Right.
And that's powerful because most brands want a scale story, right? Because then when you start pitching to other brands, they also are interested in that in terms of saying, okay, I'm now here. Can you take me there?
Sure.
So, yeah, that's how I would.
That was very insightful.
Yeah.
The fact that you mentioned as a new agency, you should work with brands who are new and
Yeah.
you guys should grow together.
Yeah, and I think because, and going back to our initial years at Schbang, we didn't have too many names of people who are brands that are the most exciting in the market, right? But we did some hard work for them, and we did some great work for them, and the referrals came from that. So they may have not helped build us our best portfolio in those initial years, but they help build trust and they help build confidence. And that is, the marketing community is a very small community. So, people talk.
Right.
And through that, over time, the bigger brands came.
What are the new trends you see right now, and what are the trends you're expecting for next 5 years in terms of the digital? What's going on in terms of that?
So I think a big one is automation, and I think the whole AI story is a huge one. I think the way we use it in an interesting way is what it's going to be about. So I feel a lot of the buzz in the last year was about campaigns very obviously showing that they've used AI because AI was the buzzword, right? So whether it was brands saying we've used generative art to do this and make this creative or whatever it is, right? Tomorrow, that's not going to be enough. The consumer will say, "Kya ukhada tumne ye dali mein dal ke?" Anyone can put a prompt in. So I feel like while you can, and which is why a lot of the work we have also done is we say it's not AI generated, it's AI assisted, where we still have a human being.
Yes.
It's just optimizing process. It's making it more efficient. It's making it more timely, but it's not taking away from what your individual does. So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is going to be like about how do you use AI without showing you're using AI in an obvious way, where the idea can never be the use of a technology, right? The idea can't be the use of a touch point. The idea needs to be bigger than that.
Right.
And the technology needs to power it. I think that is very important to remember because a lot of people get so excited about technology, they start thinking that's the idea. I used AI, so that's the idea, but that can't be the idea.
Right.
That's the how. In our, it's the execution, right? It's not the idea.
Right.
So, yeah.
On that note, thank you so much, Aditya, for coming today. Your insights were amazing. I'm sure people who will watch this podcast till the end will get to learn a lot. So thank you so much for coming and looking forward to see you again on the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.